When you have a pest problem, your first move may be to grab the phone and call an exterminator. You'll probably need to do that if you have termites or bedbugs. But if it's just some ants or cockroaches in the kitchen, or maybe a few mice in the garage, you may be able to do it yourself. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, a contributing editor at checkbook.org.
Welcome to Consumerpedia at checkbook.org. We're the nonprofit that helps consumers select services, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on checkbook.org to be completely independent and objective. Now, here's the host of Consumerpedia, America's consumer expert, the Consumer Man, Herb Weisbaum.
In this episode, we'll look at some of the most common household pest problems and offer DIY tips for eliminating them. We'll also share ideas on what to look for when hiring a pest control company. Checkbook surveys find that prices and quality of service for household pest treatments vary widely. And with us to talk about all that, Checkbook's executive editor, Kevin Brasler.
Hey, Herb, how are you?
Good. You've called me a pest many times, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the creepy crawly things that make everybody go crazy in their house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll talk about you being a pest later on in a different episode.
Well, you write that most homeowners can control most pest problems on their own without hiring exterminators.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, except for termites and bed bugs, which really do require specialized knowledge and equipment, we can handle most of them, especially, just minor problems on our own. And that's because with a lot of pests, it usually just requires, being more careful about cleanup in the kitchen. Sometimes it requires setting some baits or traps. But for the most part, what you can do to eliminate a minor pest problem, you can do it yourself, what companies are going to do if you hire a company to do it.
And obviously, the approach varies depending on what the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, a big difference between what you can do and what a pro can do, it depends on the severity of the problem. I mean, if you have a major roach infestation or a lot of mice, then it may be better to hire pros just because they're going to have more knowledge, access to stronger chemicals. But it's mostly the knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. But it also depends on your level of squeamishness. If you have mice or rats, you can usually do what a pest control company is going to do on your own, but it's going to require probably for you to set some traps. You're going to have to get your hands dirty. And I hate to say it, but the lethal traps tend to work better than the humane ones. So if you don't think you can stomach dealing with a dead animal, which I'm in that camp, I hate touching this stuff, even with gloves on or with kitchen tongs. If you can't stand it, you might need to hire an exterminator to deal with it.
My wife will not go in the crawl space under the house until I go in and give her the all clear. It's like going in with like the FBI, clear, clear, and then she'll go in.
I don't blame her. And I think also, though, a big component to hiring a company, a good company that is that they'll have knowledge. Yeah, anybody can set out traps for mice, but a good company will close off the access points between the outdoors and your home where they're kind of sneaking in to begin with.
And if I just might point out, we did hire a pest control company, highly rated by Checkbook, to do the problem with the mice in the crawl space because they're coming in to get out of the cold weather. And the company not only helps seal up the places, but they use multiple types of traps, both inside and outside, to keep them from getting in the first place. So they deal with the traps, they do the different solutions, they get the dead bodies out of there. And we were in a situation where they got in and they had babies up in the insulation, and it cost us hundreds of dollars to rip all that stuff out and put new insulation. So I wasn't going to go through that again. So we got a professional, and that worked out really well for us.
On the flip side, we once had a small problem with mice in our kitchen at our old house, and we were able to deal with it ourselves in the sense that I set out some traps. I managed to catch a few of them. I would ignore the fact that the traps had killed these things so that my wife had to deal with the carcasses in the morning. But, we worked out a system is what I'm saying.
Right. I would pay cash money to see you pick up a trap with a dead mouse in it. Absolutely cash money.
As we had a specialized pair of kitchen tongs that we used just for that purpose when we had mice.
Well, we digress. So let's go through a few common pest problems and their solutions. Why don't we start with rodents?
Yeah, so one option is, again, to deal with it yourself, or to do what we eventually did, which was we adopted a bloodthirsty cat. I mean, she doesn't look dangerous. She's like the most docile creature I've ever been around. But underneath all that fur, I mean, she's like a stone cold killer. So we used to get mice every now and then in our house. No more. She has scared them all off. Word's gotten out. But beyond, like renting out our cat, really the most important thing to do is to eliminate food sources. Rodents tend to come out at night. They tend to go through kitchens. So, before you go to bed or leave the house or leave your kitchen for several hours, make sure everything is sealed up, wipe down all the surfaces, take out the trash regularly. If you have just a few mice, eliminating those easy sources of food, it might be enough to get rid of them. They may decide to go next door. You can also try baits. If you have a problem with rodents, you can set out baits in spots where you've seen their droppings. The baits, the poisons that are used for rodents, they're basically blood thinners. So mice and rats, they can't vomit, so they eat the bait. They die from internal bleeding, which is just sounds awful. So the problem is you might be able to kill off a few that way, but they pretty quickly get suspicious of baits. And so you can probably knock out an infestation if you see a few mice or their droppings. Right away, you might be able to knock out those culprits, but after a while, they're not going to take the bait anymore.
So to speak.
Yeah, so to speak. So the good news is that if you put out these baits, it's in really low dosage in terms of the harm it might do to pets. It's another issue, though. You don't want to put out these baits where your cat could eat them, although the theory is that these baits are so bitter tasting that only rodents would eat it and find it palatable because they can't taste the bitterness or something like that. Another way is just to set up old-fashioned traps. Bait them with peanut butter, put them where you've noticed mouse droppings. Before we had a cat, when we had our problem, I just learned to put out a bunch of baits and it worked. We ended up killing off the problem. It sounds awful, but that's what you're doing. There are humane traps you can try. Whether they'll work or not, it kind of depends on your mice, really. Some will get caught in them and others will get suspicious of them. But the point here is that when it comes to controlling rodents, you can do on your own the stuff pest control services can do, especially if you're just setting out traps or trying to deal with a minor problem. You can even caulk up the points of entry that they might spot. But as we've already said, the big difference between you and a pest control company, a good pest control company, is that their workers will have a lot of experience and knowledge about, how the rodents are getting in and how to stop them as opposed to just putting out a bunch of baits, which still may work anyways.
So before we move on to roaches, what's the name of this killer cat? Brutus or something like that?
Her official name is the Great Catsby, but everyone calls her Moochie because she's a mooch. You can't, if you have food anywhere near her, she's all up in your face. So we call her Moochie.
Go get a Moochie. All right, let's go on to roaches. They creep a lot of people out. What do you do with that? Because the cat's not going to work for them.
Though it's a similar approach, just minus the cat. You start with sanitation. Just really be careful about eliminating all sources of food. But with roaches, you also need to eliminate standing water. But like with rodents, you can buy baits. They'll knock out a minor problem. You can buy them at any, home improvement store. Some of them contain poison, which gets carried back to the nest and gets shared with other roaches. But they'll get suspicious of those baits after a while. There are also sticky traps. They don't work as well as the poison, but they're safer for pets. Exterminators, they tend to come in and they just spray kitchens and baths. Most use boric acid or they use pesticides for this or a combination of the two. What they use is, for the most part, it's very safe in low doses to humans and pets. What they're using, it's similar to what you can buy at lower concentrations at hardware stores. And the problem is that none of the things they use, the boric acid or these pesticides, they won't kill the eggs. So they'll kill the grown-ups, but often with roaches, you need to buy 2 treatments. So they'll come and they'll spray, and then they'll come back within 30 to 60 days, depending on the roach problem you have, and retreat. So if you have a big infestation, or if you live in an apartment or a townhouse and the roaches are coming from next door, then it may make sense to get regular treatments every 6 weeks or so. But for most of us, that's overkill. You're just increasing your costs and getting exposed to more pesticides. If you have a minor roach problem, it's usually enough to get 1 or 2 treatments. And if they're done well, the problem will be taken care of.
Springtime means flowers, and for many homes, it means ants. What's the best way to deal with an ant infestation?
So the good news is that unlike roaches and mice and rats, ants that come indoors and visit you, they don't carry any diseases. So they're just, a nuisance. If you can locate the ant nest, it's likely going to be outside and they're coming in from that nest and then going back to the nest. If you can find the outdoor nest, you can hit it with sprayable insecticide. The cans of stuff, ant killer that you can buy at any grocery store or hardware store. To find that nest, you might have to follow the ants' movements, see their little trail of ants as they're coming and going into the ground, and then spray that trail too. So if you can't find the nest outdoors, if it's underneath your house or something, you're just going to have to do the best you can indoors. You have to cut out their paths, maybe have to recaulk in the bathroom where you find them coming in. As with roaches and mice, clean up spills, clean up grease and things like that. You can also just, use soapy water to clean surfaces where you see the ants. It kind of erases their trails and might make it harder for them to find your food sources again, to find their way back to your kitchen. You can also just spray ant spray into areas where you see them. That'll linger and kill them for a while. But, what we do at our house is we get ants every year. It doesn't matter how careful we are. Mm-hmm. We get ants every year. We end up putting out these little baits. There's little plastic discs you put out. We find the ones that work best it's made by taro, and it's like a liquid bait. So we put those out, and then at first, for a couple of days, you'll actually see a lot more ant activity because they're getting the bait. It's food source. So now they're attracted to it. But after a few more days, then it usually kills off the whole nests. And if it doesn't, then we just put out more baits. At our house, eventually, the ants just stop bothering us. Either it's because we've poisoned them with the baits, or they've just found a better food source outdoors. But, with ants, for the most part, you don't need to hire help to deal with them.
As we said before, sometimes you really do need to hire a pro. I'm not dealing with termites or bedbugs or wasp nests on my own. I hire for that. We're going to discuss those pest problems straight ahead. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, and this is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
From tech gadgets to financial tips, travel hacks to health trends, Consumerpedia provides expert insights and practical advice to help you save time and money, avoid the scams, and stay healthy. With dozens of episodes to choose from, Consumerpedia is your guide to making informed decisions. Just go to consumerpedia.org and search by episode title or topic, such as home, travel, auto, finance, consumer protection, or technology. Checkbook's Consumerpedia podcast. Consumerpedia.org. Listen and learn, and share with your friends.
Bedbugs have made a comeback and are notoriously difficult to control, so how do we deal with them, Kevin?
And you usually don't discover that you even have a small infestation until they've chewed on you for a few weeks, basically. Oh. My parents recently had bed bugs in their assisted living apartment, and it was just a total nightmare. I mean, they had to get rid of all their mattresses and their upholstered furniture. It's not a lot of it because they're in a small place, but, they basically had to give up everything they owned either to get rid of it or for intense laundering.
Wow.
And then they bug bombed their apartment and others on their floor because other people had bed bugs. And even then, all the bed bugs didn't go away right away. They came back in a week, so they had to go through all this again. And this is really interesting, Herb. I didn't know this until my parents went through it. They actually have bed bug sniffing dogs to detect them. They bombed the place, and then they took these dogs through, and the dogs would pick up on, there's a dead one over here, so do we need to retreat or not? That was really interesting to me.
Wow. See, a cat would never do that.
Cat would never bother, right? Cat would be like, what are you bothering? What am I doing here?
Exactly.
So if you have bed bugs, you'll probably need a pro to deal with them. They'll hopefully take similar steps to what I've just described, and just be prepared for multiple rounds of treatment. I mean, they are just really difficult to kill off, especially if you have a big infestation. Unlike other pests, with bed bugs, you probably will want to hire a company for continued monitoring and treatment over the course of even a year. Definitely ask about guarantees. With my parents, the company charged, it was a fortune. It was thousands of dollars to treat their apartment. But on the other hand, they had promised in writing to come back as often as necessary to do whatever it took for a year to make sure that they were bed bug free.
Well, good for them. Termites. I don't think anybody would try to deal with termites on their own. You got to hire somebody for that.
Yeah, you really do. And an invasion of roaches or mice is unpleasant. Termites can actually wreck the joint. So the good news is, I think a lot of us, when we hear termites, we think it's like a cartoon situation where they're just going to eat your whole home and it's just going to collapse. The good news is that termite nests, they grow pretty slowly. We're talking about a couple feet at the most each year. And so if you have them, you'll usually spot them. You'll see their swarmers in the springtime, or you'll even notice that the wood flooring, there's a problem there. You'll see tubes outdoors or something like that. And you don't have to worry about them consuming your entire house necessarily. Most companies, what they do is what they've always done. They inject kind of an underground chemical barrier around the whole perimeter of your home. So that's expensive to do. They have to basically drill down in there, inject that pesticide, and then do that all along the perimeter of your home, dozens of times. And, where your driveway is or a walkway is, they have to bore through that, drill through that, inject the poison, and then they fill in the hole again. So it costs thousands of dollars for this work. So the main thing is it's really, really important to make sure that you really do have termites before you hire a company to do this, because we've heard of a lot of stories from homeowners that got ripped off by companies that said, oh yeah, you have a huge infestation. I'm going to solve this for $4,000. But in the end, they probably didn't have an infestation at all. They had been lied to. And sometimes if you have a minor infestation, you don't have to treat the whole perimeter of the home. You might be able to treat it locally, especially if it's like in a crawl space or something like that, where they can easily get to it and kind of trench the problem as opposed to treating the whole perimeter of your home. So it's really important to have several companies look at your problem and give you estimates. One reason is you'll see big price differences from company to company to deal with the same termite problem. But you also might discover that one company that told you you had a huge problem, another is going to say, oh, you don't have a problem at all. They're lying to you. There's a different approach also. Some companies, they'll put out baits. Basically, they're sticking wooden stakes into the ground around your home, and then they check them regularly. If they find that there's termite activity, they'll put pesticide on them, and that pesticide will get taken back to the colony and kill off the colony, in theory. To me, if you have an infestation and you can't just deal with it locally, I prefer the more kind of conservative approach of just treating the whole house. Do talk with companies about the different options. I think that, kind of the bait and see approach, it's expensive too. I just think that in the long run, you're usually better off just making sure you're getting rid of the whole problem in one shot. Another thing to keep in mind when you're getting termite treatments is to compare guarantees. So what happens is most companies, they'll charge you to keep their guarantee in effect after the first year. So they'll come back, monitor. If you have termites again, then they'll retreat down the road, but you have to pay to keep that guarantee in force. And it can be really expensive. It can cost $1,000 or more per year for that guarantee. I'd pay to keep the guarantee in effect for like up to 2 years. And after that, if you haven't had any problems, you're probably not going to see more termites again. You can probably let the guarantee lapse.
But the most important thing, get several estimates and what your problem is from several companies so you can compare what they're telling you.
And be prepared to have to make tough decisions. Like, a lot of these companies will say, well, I'll treat for $3,000 or $4,000. And then, if you want to keep this in effect, you got to keep paying this much every year. And you'll have to decide how much it's worth to you. Because if the termites come back, well, now you start all over again, right? You have to pay for a whole new treatment. I think that's usually unlikely. If the company does a good job at treating your entire perimeter of your home, you're not going to see termites again. And also, you won't see a lot of other things. You won't get as many spiders and crickets and things like that, because they're going to keep those insects out too.
So at checkbook.org, Kevin, we also have advice about dealing with other pests, carpenter bees, stinging insects, fleas, mosquitoes, moths, those kind of things.
Yeah, and usually the best approach depends on the type of the problem. But again, most homeowners can handle most pest problems on their own. Although if you don't own a bee suit, you're probably going to hire someone to deal with wasps or hornets.
Oh, yeah.
But for most things, there's stuff you can do on your own. And if not, just make sure you're hiring a really good pest control company that takes a conservative approach and is thoughtful about what they're doing.
So you have decided to hire an exterminator. What should you be looking for and what sort of guarantees should you expect? We're going to talk to Kevin about that next. I'm Herb Weisbaum, and this is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Consumerpedia Fast Facts. According to the Smithsonian Institution, while humans have been around 300,000 years, insects have been present for about 350 million years. There are about 91,000 different species of insects in the United States. Ants can lift and carry more than 50 times their own weight. The queen of a certain species of termite can lay 40,000 eggs per day. Houseflies find sugar with their feet, which are 10 million times more sensitive than human tongues. And wasps feeding on fermenting juice have been known to get drunk and pass out.
Okay, you've decided you need to hire an exterminator. If you live in the 7 cities where Checkbook rates services, you can use those ratings to help identify companies that do good work and have knowledgeable staff. But Kevin, for those who don't live in Boston, Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Philly, San Francisco, Seattle, or Washington, D.C., tell them what our ratings showed.
Yeah, well, one thing we found is that there were just big differences among companies when we asked about things like, knowledge of staff and doing the work properly on the first try. Another thing we noticed time and again when we do these surveys is that the big national chains, they don't do well in our surveys of customers. They tend to not have knowledgeable staff, and they tend to have to, do retreatments in order to fix the problem. And a lot of these companies push expensive monthly contracts to deal with problems that should be resolved after just one treatment. So when you need to hire an exterminator, I think it's important to ask them, how are you going to treat my problem and why? Because unless you have termites or bed bugs, one well-done treatment, it should knock out your issue. One initial treatment and one follow-up treatment should be enough. For mice and rats, it may take a few visits, but the thing to do is to avoid these companies that send out workers every month on a schedule, whether you have a problem or not. A lot of them really push this, especially the big national chains. They're really relying on long-term contracts these days for revenue. And you really don't want that. I mean, you don't need a bunch of continuous pesticide treatments, for example, for roaches if you don't notice that you have roaches. But a lot of these companies push that, we're going to guarantee this service. We're going to come out every month and spray whether you need it or not. They're doing that because they want a steady source of cash.
But as you pointed out in your checkbook story, some companies already have strong guarantees, right? They're going to come back and treat the problem for free if it persists.
Yeah, and that's really what you're looking for. I mean, if you have roaches or rodents, after an initial treatment, they may need to come back out. Some of them say, well, I'll do that within 30 days. We'll retreat for free if you see problems within the next 30 days. Others, you can just pay as you go. You can pay for each time they need to come out. Yeah, I just think it's a better arrangement to pay as you go or pay for a few visits than to, making these blanket payments every month to the same company over and over again. The problem is gone. You don't want to be on the hook for future costs. And that's what happens a lot with pest control these days.
So what about so-called natural pesticides? I see a lot of companies advertising green approaches to pest control.
Yeah, I think you have to be really, really skeptical. Many companies, they say they use environmentally friendly options. But come on, what they're doing often is killing insects. They can't promise to kill the insects you don't want, but leave the other ones alone. I see this with mosquito control a lot. They're basically coming and bombing your entire yard with pesticide. It may be an organic pesticide. It may be an organic strain and it comes from some flower, but they're still killing beneficial insects probably when they're spraying for all this. A lot of companies, for example, they also say that they have an organic approach to treating roaches. What they're probably using then is boric acid. And it's very safe product. It's very safe to humans and pets in low amounts. But it's not like they're taking some alternative green approach. They're just calling it something different. There are, though, some chemicals that are natural derived things that work well to repel pests. So, for example, peppermint and rosemary oils, those will kill most stinging insects. But I had this old exterminator friend who I talked to about this, and he said, those things, those peppermint oils and all that, those products, they'll kill the bees and the wasps, but not as quick as the old-fashioned pesticides. And he says, and if you're doing the killing, not nearly fast enough. Like, you want them dead quick before they sting you, and the natural ones don't do it fast enough. But some companies, they do try to focus on sealing up points of entry. This is key, especially to prevent mice and rats from getting in, but also other insects. But really, any good pest control company will look to eliminate points of entry and then also try to get rid of the problem you have. I just think it's important to talk to companies if they say they have some natural approach about what that actually means, because in a lot of cases, it's just BS.
Bedbugs are nasty, ants are annoying, and removing dead mice or rats is just yucky.
Yeah. I think that summarizes everything. And the biggest pest is herb weisbaum.
Well, of course. Kevin, really, really good information. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Herb.
Well, that's it for this edition of Consumerpedia. We hope you'll rate the episode and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Remember, we release new episodes every other Thursday. Another way you can support this show is to follow us on Consumerpedia on Facebook and Instagram, and at My Consumerpedia on X, formerly Twitter. I'm Herb Weisbaum. Thank you for listening.
Consumerpedia is a public service of checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that helps you save money and make smarter choices. You can count on Checkbook to help you find the best services and avoid the worst, with local ratings that are accurate and unbiased. If you live in or around these 7 cities and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Minneapolis-St. Paul, Seattle, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. To get your free 30-day subscription, go to checkbook.org/Consumerpedia. Consumerpedia, empowering consumers to save money and make smarter choices.